All right, you guys ready? Now. Okay, here we go. So, this first one says that we have a piecewise function. So piecewise just means that we have a function that is defined using two different pieces. And one piece of the function is the line y equals x. And the other piece of the function is the line y equals 3. So we have two different pieces. One is y equals x. The other is y equals 3. And if you guys remember, anytime we just have an x with no exponent on it, that means it's a linear equation, y equals mx plus b. So if I was to rewrite this so that I could see what the slope is and see what the y-intercept is, I would say y equals 1 over 1x plus 0. So a plus 0 on the end, because that's what it would be if you didn't have a number on the end. And if you didn't have a number in the front, then the number in the front would be a 1. And if I want to write that as a fraction, I can just call it 1 over 1. So if this is how I write it, does anyone remember what the y-intercept should be? 0. And then the slope tells us to, rise over 1, up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1. Okay, I'm going to write this in pencil. Do we all have pencils? Because I'm going to erase a little bit today. There's pencils in the back by the pencil sharpener, I think, if you need to grab one. You need an eraser? Yes. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to graph, and I'm going to do this lightly. I have my y-intercept of 0, and then I'm going to go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. And I'm going to lightly draw that line. So that's the graph right there. And then after I draw that line, I'm going to look at what the domain of that particular part or that particular piece is. So the function says I'm going to use all of the x values that I have except for -3. So I'm going to look at the line, and where the x value is -3, I'm going to put an open circle right there. And that value does not get included, so I'm going to just erase that little part inside that open circle. And then the rest of the line gets used. So I'm going to make it dark. So when I draw a piecewise function, I lightly draw it first because I'm always going to erase a little bit of it. How do we draw the line y equals 3? It's a horizontal line. So we're going to look at y equals 3, and we're going to draw a horizontal line right there. We're going to make it kind of light. Y equals 3 is right here. And this one tells us that we only get to use the horizontal line for the x value of -3 exactly, but nothing else. So on that horizontal line, I'm going to look at the value where it says x is -3, and I'm going to make that dark. That is the only part of my line I get to keep. I have to erase the rest of it. And then that's my piecewise function. All right, I'm going to talk us through it again. So for number 2, we have two functions. We have y equals -x plus 3, and we have y equals -x plus 2. So with the first one, what's my y-intercept? 3. And then what's my slope? -1, and if I was to think of that as rise over run, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. Okay, so I'm going to go down 1 to the right, down 1 to the right. And I'm going to lightly draw that line. And then I'm going to look at the graph and see what part it wants me to keep. So it wants me to look at x equals 2. What should I do on x equals 2? Do I have an open circle or a closed circle? Closed, because it can equal 2. So I'm going to look at my line where x equals 2, and I'm going to make that a closed circle. And then it says it is true for all the x values that are less than 2. So am I keeping the left side of the line or the right side of the line? Left. So if you look at this, all the numbers that are smaller than 2 are like all the negatives, and 0 and 1. And if you can see that, the arrow's pointing to the left. You guys see that? Yeah. So that means keep the left side. So we're going to keep the left side, make it dark, and then we're going to erase the right side. Yeah.
Why are we only keeping the left side?
Because it said x is less than or equal to 2. And anything less than 2 would be on the left side. All right. The next one has a y-intercept of 2, and it has the same slope, so it still goes down 1, right 1. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that line. Now, the more of these you do, the more you can like shortcut this process. So if you feel like you can do it without drawing the whole line and erasing part of it, that's totally fine. But I find that most students make less mistakes if they draw the whole thing and just erase part of it, or at least they get less confused in the beginning. All right, so I have my whole line drawn, and then the function says I can only have the x values that are greater than 2. So it's going to be an open circle at 2, and I keep the right side because the arrow's pointing right. So it's pointing to numbers bigger than 2, which are all the positive numbers over here. And then I erase the left part. All right. Are there any questions that are coming up in your brains already?
Yeah, no, but just keep going.
So we're definitely going to keep going, but is there any part that anybody doesn't understand yet where I need to explain it better the next example?
No.
We're okay so far? Okay. We're going to do some more difficult problems now. So if we look at number 3, it has some parent functions in it. So this one has a quadratic. How do we know how to graph a quadratic without a calculator? We draw the chart, right? So we're trying to graph this quadratic without a calculator. So we're going to write the numbers for a quadratic. Do we know those? Yep. So we got -2, 4, -1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1,
And 2,
4. And then this one these are relatively nice. Like, you guys have done much more difficult parent function transformations than this, because this one only has one transformation, left 5. So that's -7, 4, -6, 1. We got to do this. All right, so -7, 4, -6, 1, and I'm drawing it kind of light because I want to be able to erase it if I need to. And there's our parabola, or quadratic, that's been shifted to the left 5. So it looks something like that. And then what do we keep? Craig. Hey. Your eyes awake?
Yeah, I was right.
Oh, okay. You were just looking down so hard. All right. What do we keep? -4. So I'm going to look at -4. I'm going to make it dark. everything to the left. It would not be a whole because it says equal.
So I just have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind.
We are learning this because in all the levels up to calculus, basically, you're learning about the different parts of the graph and like how to describe everything and how to recognize things and how to write things correctly. It's the math above this that you finally get to see why you're doing some of this stuff. But for you guys, you just have to know the vocabulary, you have to know what it means, you have to be able to write it efficiently and correctly so that next year, if you choose to go on, you know how to handle things, basically. So we don't get as much of the application here, unfortunately. Okay, so I made the left side dark. Why did I do that?
Because the arrow is pointing to the left.
Arrow went left, and then I go ahead and erase the right side. Okay. And then our next parent function is absolute value. So I'm going to go ahead and write those points. Oh, 2, 2. And then what transformation is happening to these points? Yeah, we're reflecting over the x-axis, which changes the sign of the y value. So -2, -2, -1, -1, 0, 0, 1, -1, and 2, -2. Now, when we graphed these points, it didn't give us a lot of the graph. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
So the nice thing about absolute value graphs is you can kind of follow the pattern if you need to draw more of it. So these ones, if they just are going through all the corners, then just extend it and make it go through all the corners. So I'm going to do that just to make sure I've got enough of the graph. And then what does the piecewise function tell us to keep? So start with a whole at -4. And then what? Everything to the right. And then the stuff on the left gets erased. Okay, let's try number 4. So number 4 is going back to a little bit more comfortable because it's just straight lines. So the first one says x plus 2. Where do we start that one? At 2. And what's the pattern tell us to do? So up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. Or down 1, left 1, down 1, left 1. Okay, so there's our line. And what do we keep? Keep -4. So draw a circle on it. And keep what side? The left side. Okay. Yeah.
Are we ever going to have like a different slope for this problem?
Other than 1?
Yeah.
Yeah, there happen to be no other slopes on this one, but there is slopes on the assignment. So you just make sure that you write it as a fraction, and the number on the top tells you to go up or down. Up if it's positive, down if it's negative. The number on the bottom always tells you to go to the right. Always to the right. Okay. All right, so we've got the first one. The next one, remember, means y equals -6. So when I say y equals -6, how do I graph that? So it's horizontal line, right? At -6, so it goes all the way across the graph like this. And then the part where it tells us what to keep is making a sandwich. So what's the left side of the sandwich? -4. So on the left side of the sandwich, we put a hole. On the right side of the sandwich, you fill it in because it's got an equal to. So left side of the sandwich is at -4, right side of the sandwich is at +4. And since it's a sandwich, we fill in the middle and we erase the stuff on either side. So that's how you handle it when you have a part like that where the X is sandwiched between two things, is you draw it so your graph is in between two things. Okay. And then for the last one, we have X -3. So what do we do there? So y-intercept of -3. And then we have our slope of 1. And what part of the graph does it tell us to keep? 4. Right, Dalton? Mm-hmm. To which direction? To the right.
To the right.
Okay. 5 or 6? Which one do you guys want to do?
6.
6? Yeah, what's your question?
So we wouldn't like go from the -3 onward. Like you started from the -3. Oh, never mind. It's not
So it says greater than 4, so I started at the 4 and I went to the right. When I first drew it, I would have had the -3 in there. But when I put my circle here and I knew I was keeping it to the right, then I went ahead and I erased the rest of it. Okay. All right, for number 6, we start off with an absolute value. So what do we have to do?
You write the points.
Write the points. And what's our transformation?
Right 1.
Right 1. Okay. Wait. Right 1?
Oh, I was playing with you.
Yeah, you were just checking to make sure everyone was listening, right? So they weren't, no. So we're going to add 1 to the X value. And add 1 to the X value.
Stop playing before we get moved. We don't get here for 15 minutes.
Now, the graph is telling me to keep the part to the left of -1. Do I have enough of my graph drawn?
No, so draw more.
No, so I gotta draw more. I'm gonna keep the pattern going. Okay. So what do I do at -1?
Can you wait real quick?
Mm-hmm. So we have something not filled in, right? At -1. And then what part do we keep?
all the numbers
To the left. Okay. And then this one right here, it just has a number. What does it mean? It means y equals 6, which is a line, a horizontal line at 6. And what part do we keep?
Everything to the. You do the sandwich.
So I have -1 is filled in. And then what? And then 4
Oh,
is open. And then
Erase the outside.
erase the outside, keep the middle.
Miss Rise,
Mm-hmm.
can you slow down a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, you can speed it up.
All right. And what do we have to do the next part?
find the square root number.
Yeah, the numbers for the square root. Anyone know what they are? There's no negatives because it's a square root. Not 8, not 2. 0,
0, 0,
0.
1, 1, and 4, 2.
Okay. So this one doesn't have as many because the negatives don't work. Can't square root a negative. So when we did this one, we didn't have as many points. And then what transformation is it having us do?
Minus 2 and a half.
Yeah, so move left 2, which means we're minusing 2 from the x's. Do we have enough points?
No.
Anyone know why we skipped 2 and 3 on this? We did 0 and 1 and 4. We skipped 2 and 3. Because they don't have square roots. So we'd skip 5 because you can't square root 5. We'd skip 6. We'd skip 7. We'd skip 8. And then what would we get for 9? 3. Okay. So I'm adding one more point so that we can see if we will have enough points to draw the graph. And I'm doing that because I didn't have enough points here. So left 2, B7, 3. And what is it asking us to keep?
4.
So keep the 4, fill it in, and go
To the right.
to the right. All right. How are your brains doing? Okay. So with these ones, the better you get at it, the less you have to draw. You'll start to anticipate where you would have needed to erase, and then you don't even have to draw that part at all. But for now, we can go ahead and do these steps. So in the packet that I'm going to give you, you will not be doing the whole packet. Probably 1 through 10 is the goal. Okay?